Deliver. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Brendan Miller. I'm counsel for Freedom Corp, which is a entity that represents the protesters that attended in Ottawa in January and February of 2022. And thank you for coming here today, sir. Sir, I just want to begin dealing with the issue with respect to the agreement that then went awry on February 14th and 15th and 16th, okay? So I first want to put to you a statement from one of your colleagues, Mr. Arpin, and I want to ask you if that is an accurate understanding of what he said. And I'm doing this to be fair to you because he's testifying next, right? So as I understand it, this is Mr. Arpin's evidence on that point, is that on February 12th, 2022, an agreement was reached with the protesters who promised to remove 75% of the trucks from residential areas. Mr. Arpin had several conversations with Mr. French, including an in-person meeting to finalize the details of the agreement. Mr. Arpin spoke only with Mr. French and held no discussions with protesters. The mayor did not take part in the discussions between Mr. French and Mr. Arpin. Per the agreement, some vehicles would be relocated to Wellington Street. The city's understanding was that some protesters wanted to leave entirely and the others would relocate to sites outside the city, in brackets, for instance, Vanklik Hill, close brackets. According to the city, it was understood that the agreement was not a permanent solution, but it was nevertheless considered a short-term victory for residents overwhelmed by the protests. On February 13th, 2022, some senior members of the Ottawa Police Service, including Chief Peter Slolly, Deputy Chief Steve Bell, and Superintendent Rob Drummond, were advised of the content of the agreement. They shared no concern about the plan. Furthermore, during the meeting with some senior OPS members, they stated that the agreement could ease tensions with the protesters and increase the police's capacity to respond, since they would have a smaller footprint to manage. Also, it was Mr. Arpin's understanding that the Superintendent Drummond took part in a meeting where he was involved in elaborating the plan's details with Mr. K, if I'll call you that, I'll butcher pronouncing it, a meeting in which Mr. Arpin was not involved. According to Mr. Arpin, there was no doubt that Deputy Chief Bell and Superintendent Drummond were aware that a number of vehicles would be added to Wellington Street. Chief Slolly was advised of the agreement during a meeting whose attendees included Kim Ayotte, General Manager of the city's Emergency and Protective Services, and Mr. K. He also received by email a copy of the letter from Mayor Watson to the convoy organizers confirming the agreement. The agreement was announced to council members that day. On February 14th, 2022, the protesters began moving the trucks with the support of OPS. In the afternoon, according to information provided to Mr. Arpin and for reasons unknown to him, the OPS ended the operation. It was his understanding that approximately 102 vehicles, in brackets, roughly 25% of the vehicles, had been moved in the meantime, including approximately 40 heavy trucks. Is that correct?
May I ask what you're reading from? Because I missed that part at the beginning. If you said it, my apologies.
It's your colleague, Mr. Arpin's statement.
Oh, his statement.
That's what he said happened.
Sorry, I think we might have to take this fact by fact. That was a fairly long read
Right.
to ask whether the witness agrees with whether that entire description is correct.
Sure.
In addition to that, Mr. Commissioner, I just point out that Mr. Miller is seeking to ask a question about a statement of a witness who hasn't testified yet, and leave needs to be sought to question on that statement.
I'm not going to question you about it. I just wanted to know whether or not it's accurate. I have to put it to you in order to make sure that I'm fair to you. And so I can break it down.
I think that comes pretty close to questioning
Yeah.
on it. You're asking him to confirm that information. Right. So perhaps we can go at it in a different way, and you can put to him questions about certain facts, and does he agree with that, and go at it one sort of block at a time without reference to the memo, because in the end, he can't confirm what Mr.
Right.
Arpin said or didn't say, and he'll be up, if all goes well, pretty soon.
Right. So, Mr. K, on February 12th, 2022, there was an agreement reached with the protesters. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in that agreement, they promised to move 75% of the trucks from the residential areas?
I don't recall the specific 75% of the trucks, but so I can't confirm that.
Okay. And per the agreement, some of the vehicles were to be relocated to Wellington Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it was your understanding that some of the protesters wanted to leave entirely as well?
That's correct.
And it was your understanding that others were going to relocate to sites outside the city?
That's what we were told.
Yep. And according to the city, it understood the agreement was not a permanent solution,
That's correct.
but the city can nevertheless consider it a short-term victory for residents overwhelmed by protests.
Yes.
Right. And so on February 13th, 2022, there was a meeting between members of the Ottawa Police Service, including Chief Peter Sully, Deputy Chief Bell, and Superintendent Rod Drummond, and they were advised of the content of the agreement. You're aware of that?
I'm not sure that Superintendent Drummond was on that call because he didn't get assigned till after 3:30 that day when I emailed Chief Slowly asking for a representative from police. I believe who was on the call was Acting Deputy Chief Trish Ferguson, then Deputy Chief Bell, Chief Slowly, myself, and Kim Ayotte.
But is it fair to say that none of the Ontario Police Service members on the call shared concerns about the plan?
Chief Slowly did share some concerns about the plan from my operational capacity to be able to affect the plan, as I stated earlier.
But they did state, the OPS members that were present did state that the agreement could ease tensions. Is that right?
Yes.
And by carrying out the agreement, it could also increase the police's capacity to respond.
Yes.
So is there any doubt at all that Deputy Chief Bell knew about this agreement?
No, he knew about the agreement.
And even though he may not have been there, Superintendent Drummond eventually found out about the agreement that day. Is that fair?
He would have been briefed up, I would assume, after he was assigned or before he was assigned, yes.
Right. And Superintendent Drummond never raised any concern with you with respect to that agreement?
No.
So it's true that on February 14th, 2022, the protesters began to move the trucks with the support of OPS. Is that right?
They did that Monday morning. They started, yes.
Right. And is it not true that it was OPS who ended the operation?
Yes.
Right. So it was not the protesters or the truckers who didn't follow through with the deal. They were stopped by OPS from following through with it. Isn't that correct?
Well, not exactly. There were two aspects to it. There were also people parked in the street who were refusing to move their vehicles. So they weren't accepting the deal as part of the deal. And Ottawa Police eventually stopped it, and that's a question for them. But there were people who refused to participate in the deal on the street.
Right. And so wasn't there approximately 102 vehicles moved, roughly 25%, and they had moved in the meantime approximately 40 heavy trucks? Is that not correct?
Well, as I said earlier, that number is in dispute. I had heard 40 trucks and possibly up to 100 total vehicles, but I don't think that represents 25% of all the vehicles because the heavy trucks might have been about 500. The numbers were not nailed down, and even that day on how many were moved, we couldn't get an accurate count.
Okay. So you did have dealings with Mr. Keith Wilson throughout these negotiations. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. And that included both texts and phone calls?
Yes.
All right. So if we can bring up document HRF 0001333, please. And can you scroll down? Just down to the text messages. to the first, to the beginning, right there. That you scroll back up, page 2, please. Just right to the top. Okay, so, Mr. Kay, is that a set of text messages between you and Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Wilson there, he's in blue and you're in gray, is that fair?
I'm in gray, that's right.
Right.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no. So there you state, or Keith there, Mr. Wilson states to you, trucker logistics delegation of 5 persons will be arriving for a 5:30 PM meeting at the City Hall. Please confirm receipt. Thank you, Keith here. And you confirmed it, and you said, call me when they arrive and tell me what City Hall entrance they are at, and I will come and get them. Thank you, Keith. Steve K., right?
Yep.
So you guys met. And if we could scroll down. And that was on February 13th. And he says, will do. I have given Eva and Tom, being Eva Chipiuk and Tom Barrazo, your cell number. And you said, perfect. There was then some issues, as I understand, with some misunderstanding on social media, and you had an exchange about that.
Yes.
And that's that exchange. If you could scroll down, ma'am. And Mr. Wilson got that fixed.
Yes.
Right. And Mr. Wilson then let you know, if we can just scroll down, I think the whole thing's there too. On February 14th at 10:13 a.m., FYI, trucks are ready to be moved, but are being blocked by police. And you responded, I'm fixing that. We are allowing 10 trucks now as a sign of good faith. And he responds, thanks. Eva is heading to Chris B., being Chris Barber, to be on the ground there. And you said, okay, good. Then he stated, FYI, Tamara Lynch, former Premier Peckford, planned to hold a press conference, if you could scroll down. At 3 p.m. today, the sole and exclusive focus will be on the federal government's announcement of the invocation of the Emergencies Act. No other topics will be discussed. No comment will be made about the arrangement with the city to relocate the trucks to de-escalate pressure on the residences. And you say, thank you, this is very good to know, appreciate the heads up. And then the next day, he asked whether, that's telling you that the truckers want to move 40-plus trucks tomorrow, starting in the morning. They have room on Wellington to fit it. That would just about clear out almost all of the residential areas. And you then advise him that you're having some issues, if you could scroll down, with the Parliamentary Protection Services, and the new interim chief is engaged, and you'll know more tomorrow morning, and we'll share that with him. You then, after that, on February 16th, as I understand it, you ask him if he's available for a call, and you have a phone conversation with Mr. Wilson. Isn't that correct?
According to this, yes. I don't recall it, but yes.
Yeah. And in that phone conversation, as I understand, you apologized that the deal fell apart because of some issues arising with the Parliamentary Security Services, and that it was not the protesters' fault. Isn't that correct?
I don't recall saying that specifically because I don't have a record of it, but I remember we did have a conversation of that. I was disappointed that we couldn't move more trucks out of the neighborhood.
Right. And it's fair to say that at all times, through all of this, Mr. Wilson was engaged with you and he acted in good faith with you in your mind?
He did.
And he did everything he could in his power in order to move these trucks?
He did.
Right. And these individuals tried to move their trucks under the agreement onto Wellington, and it was the OPS who didn't allow it.
Well, I don't know if it was the OPS or PPS. I'm not sure how that worked ultimately, but events had overtaken that day. As you know, by that time, Chief Slowly had resigned, and I was made aware that Ottawa Police and the other police service were getting ready to move into tactical operations. So at that point, I think that was probably the greater reason why they stopped moving trucks up on Wellington Street.
Okay. So I want to kind of take you to another point, and there's a lot of folks watching this. Part of these commissions is to get a better understanding for the general public. And so I want to kind of use your very unique background to do that. I understand, just from looking at your background, that you have an extensive amount of experience in policing, as well as in municipal governance and general public governance generally. Isn't that right?
Yes,
All right. So you attended and graduated with both an undergraduate and master's degree from Carleton University,
yes,
and you graduated with your bachelor's degree in public administration in 1982.
yes,
You then graduated with your master's of public administration from Carleton University in 1985.
yes.
And what I would like you to do in your own words, because a master's of public administration is actually a very important program, can you explain for the folks at home and if people hear about what those programs are about in your own words?
Like generally what the
Yeah.
programs are about?
Yes, those degrees, the public administration.
Well, I would say in a succinct manner that the public administration program is about understanding good governance and what the role of the public servant is in working within a governance structure.
Right. And it's fair to say that a master's of public administration is one of the primary degrees for such positions as deputy administrators, clerks of the Privy Council, et cetera, and it's quite common for individuals who hold office like that.
Yeah, it seems to be common, yes.
Yeah. And between 1985 and 1989, what did you do for employment?
Which years?
Just after you graduated from,
I was at Gloucester Police, which was pre-amalgamation policing. There were 3 police services in the area.
okay, and that's the Gloucester Police Service, and you were there as the director, is that correct?
Yes. When I left, yes. Well, when we amalgamated, yes.
Yeah. And the amalgamation between that police service and with Ottawa and Nepean, that occurred in 1994, is that fair?
It went into effect January 1st, 1995.
Okay. And then it became Carleton Regional Police Service, is that right?
Ottawa Carleton Regional Police Service, yes.
Okay. And you became the Director General of the Carleton Regional Police Service.
That's correct.
And you were in that position between 1994 and the spring of 2000?
That's correct.
And can you explain, what are your duties as a Director of the Police Service?
Well, as the Director General, I was on the Executive Command. It's basically a civilian deputy chief, and I was responsible for the administration of the police service, for everything from finance, HR, evidence room, facilities, fleet, IT, 911. For a while, I had the court liaison function, so it was all the support functions, training, HR. So I had all the support functions that supported the operations of the police service.
Right, so you were involved in, unlike your current position, you were involved in the operation of the police service and their operations in that position?
Yes.
Okay. So can you also explain for the folks at home as well, and they may not understand, about the separation between municipalities and general executive government from the police service and how they're independent?
Yes, it's clear in the Police Services Act that the police is an independent authority reporting to the Ottawa Police Services Board, or a police board. The board has defined responsibilities over the police, but not to direct the police chief operationally. And certainly the mayor, city councilors as a body or as individuals, or city administration officials cannot direct the chief of police on any matter.
Right. And so it's fair to say that police constables and the chief make all of their operational decisions, such as what to do with a protest, as well as what to do when arresting someone or if they're going to lay charges. That is all independent of any other branch of government.
Yes.
Okay. Or supposed to be.
Supposed to be, yes, but it
Right.
is.
And on January 30th, 2022, I understand you had a phone meeting with Chief Slully, and that's when he asked you about getting the injunction. Isn't that right?
Yes.
All right. And you had agreed to prepare to seek that injunction, but it was also agreed that the final decision was going to be with you.
Yes.
Now, after January 30th, 2022, did Chief Sully, did he say to you that, or Chief Slawley, sorry, did he say to you that he no longer recommended pursuing that injunction?
No.
Were you aware that on January 31st, 2022, that Commissioner of the RCMP, Ms. Brenda Luckie, told him that he shouldn't pursue it?
At the time, no, as I stated earlier in my testimony.
Okay, and did you have any dealings as well with Ms. Brenda Luckie during these events?
Only never as individually or Commissioner Carrick. It was always in the group discussions with the deputy ministers themselves and us for the situational awareness and the resource requirements.
Okay. And I take it you did have several meetings, though, with the executive branch of the federal government. Is that right?
Can you please clarify what you mean by executive branch?
Prime Minister and ministers.
Never with the Prime Minister, but several ministers.
Right. And so were you kept apprised, at least by Mayor Watson, of his contact with the Prime Minister?
He informed me that he spoke to the Prime Minister and generally what they talked about, but not in any great detail.
Okay. Did he relay to you that on January 31st, 2022, that he asked for additional officers from the RCMP from the Prime Minister?
Yes.
Okay. And I take it that you were probably not privy to this call either, but were told about it on February 3rd, 2022. Mayor Watson had a phone meeting with Minister Mediciano.
I heard about it, but I was not on the call.
And again, he reiterated his request for more officers?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. And did you participate on February 3rd, 2022? There was a meeting with the representatives of GoFundMe. Do you remember that?
Yes, I didn't participate in that call.
Right. And is it not true that you talked the representatives of GoFundMe into freezing the funds for the convoy and for the protest, and they did so?
When you say you, are you referring to me specifically or city at large?
The city at large. My apologies. It was both yourself were present, Mayor Watson, and the city solicitor, David Wright, with some GoFundMe reps.
No, I wasn't present at that call, even though I don't know what you're referring to, but I did not participate in the calls with GoFundMe reps. I was advised of it after, and it was the city solicitor in the mayor's office that had that discussion with them.
Okay. And what was the influence for the city not getting the injunction right away after Chief Slawley said to get one?
What was the
reason? Why didn't the city go out and get the injunction?
As I said earlier, the request was very broad. It wasn't specific. We never discussed the specifics with Chief Slawley. I didn't. And we left it to the two legal teams on the police side and our city solicitor to work out what an injunction might look like in terms of scope, what evidence they were going to bring, and how it would be enforced. Those were the key issues that we were referring to. So we didn't have that information up until, well, we never did get it completely, but we were never in a position to satisfy that request until later on when we stuck to the municipal scope of operations and enforcement.
And I take it throughout your history and working in policing that you've participated in obtaining injunctions in the past, right?
No.
You've never participated in obtaining an injunction?
No.
Okay. And so you don't have any understanding of how that proceeding would work?
Well, in advance, I didn't have a good understanding, but I certainly have a pretty good one now because I was working with our city solicitor and I had lots of questions about injunctions, so it was explained to me and I think I understand how it works.
And you had said in your evidence that one of the biggest problems that you faced was not having tow trucks.
In relation to the injunction or in relation to other things?
In relation to removing the protesters or getting them to leave.
Tow trucks was a tool that would be required in an integrated operational enforcement plan. On its own, tow trucks weren't of a big value with that many trucks that were there. It had to be integrated into an operational plan, and to infect the operational plan, you needed to have those tools available to you to finish it off.
Right, but you knew that the OPS and OPP had already quite shortly after the weekend that they stayed longer than you anticipated, had already gathered the license plates, registration, et cetera, for all of those trucks, and they had them in their possession.
Yes.
Right. And so I understand the issue with tow trucks, but having all that information in their possession, and given that you were the director of police, you know what a BOLO is, don't you?
Yes, I do.
So it's a be on the lookout, right? And if one were to drive a truck here, they would have a set of keys.
Yes.
Right. So no one issued a BOLO for the drivers to have them arrested and take their keys, did they?
Not that I'm aware of.
Why?
You'd have to ask the police that. I don't know.
Okay, so you don't know about that as an option, wasn't something you considered when you were trying to deal with this issue?
It wasn't in my purview or my scope of operations to consider something like that. As you said earlier, that's a police scope issue in terms of how they choose to arrest or detain somebody.
Okay.
Hey, just to let you know, I think you're now on borrowed time, so.
Oh, I will just wrap this up then. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Willing to be accommodating, but
Yes,
there you
thank
go. There you are all.